Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our conference. Welcome to the roundtable discussion on human factor and ethics in machine and CAT translation. My name is Emilia Andreeva, and I have here with me the following guests. Mr. Tihlárik, who is the director of EXE, Translation and Localization Company. Then joining us online are Balazs Kis, the founder and co-CEO of MemoQ, Mr. Jos Moorkens, who is the Associate Professor of Translation Studies and researcher affiliated with the ADAPT Center and Center for Translation and Textual Studies in Dublin City University, and then Matej Vlačiha, who is the Language Technology Coordinator at the Slovak Translation Department of the Director General for Translation of the European Commission. Welcome, everyone. Let me introduce the topic to our audience. Ethics, put simply, examines morality, what is good and what is bad. It's not always easy to determine, and one of such fields where it poses more questions is technology, and that is why we are here and we will be discussing it. As was already mentioned today, technology has become even more present in our lives, and especially during this pandemic. Technology is an integral part of translation. We no longer translate with pen and paper. We have CAT tools, neural machine translation, which are all designs and creations of human. So naturally, we assume that these are created with good intentions and are ethical. But are they really? I would start with Mr. Kis. Can you examine or develop what are the biggest ethical concerns when developing CAT software?
I'm sorry, I just had to make this usual move, finding the unmute button. Thank you for including me in this roundtable, and I'm really happy and honored to be here in this company, and I regret that I cannot be there in person. As it happens, I have been dealing with, well, not 100% ethical issues, but compliance in my company and in the industry, and also in the GALA, Globalization Localization Association. And thus I've made some effort to familiarize myself with the issues here, but it's you don't have to actually turn to me as an authority. I am here to recommend a book to you. Actually several, but there is one that I have read recently and was published recently, and that is called The Atlas of AI. And it was written by a fellow Microsoft researcher, Kate Crawford. I'm trying to remember by heart, but that I have my notes here, yeah. And in this atlas, she is examining the entire landscape surrounding mostly not technology developments as such, but artificial intelligence developments. And because today artificial intelligence means having a problem and throwing a neural network, a deep learning engine at it to make some predictions based on previous data. It's very relevant, and there are a lot of overlaps because we simply cannot escape it. But to my mind, and the biggest issues that we are dealing with right now, and where we have the biggest, as a technology provider, where we have the biggest issues of trust from customers, partners, pretty much everyone we encounter, is information security, and especially data protection and data privacy. So it is a challenge to believe and to be believable when we collect data or when we simply store data in the cloud. Is the provider really only storing and using the data we upload for the purposes they say they use them for? Is the infrastructure they use to store and process the data as safe as they say as it is for? So I'm not yet even with artificial intelligence. I'm just citing and reciting the problems that we are encountering in our everyday crowd reality, the way we exist online, the way we exist through computers these days. So these are the most important questions, and this is where pretty much every technology provider now needs to make extra rounds, extra circles, have to walk a lot of extra miles. And we are not yet at ethics. We are, or we are at the very basics of ethics. Like, are we who we say we are? Do we what we say we do? Are we as secure and safe as we say we are? Do we only use the data we collect for the purposes we say we use them? And there are a lot of alarming developments in the world that would actually counteract this trust that is otherwise needed, because it's quite natural to have a huge distance between the user and the provider, the customer and the provider. Most of the time there is no way for them to meet each other, and I could go on, but this is the very first thing. This is the first set of issues that you encounter, and we are not yet at AI. We are not yet at the ethical issues of AI. I just want to bring up one more thing, which, well, probably is in the back of everyone's mind, but basically two things. One of them is the devices that we are using. The devices mostly have batteries and processors, and it is currently unescapable that there will be a measure of slave labor, child labor in the devices that we are using, even though the manufacturers make every possible pledge to eradicate this, to remove that. But this is a well, let's say that hot topic of discussion in the compliance community. And the other is that the cloud infrastructure, and especially training and running a neural network, an AI engine, has quite well, let's say carbon footprint. The term is rather disingenuous, because it was first introduced by British Petrol to actually move the discussion away from the responsibility of fossil fuel companies. But that said, they use considerable energy, and the energy is mostly unaccounted for, unaudited for. You cannot know if the energy that your data center draws is actually really coming from renewable sources, and if it is not, then there is the carbon impact, the climate impact of the engines as well. So you can also see that there's a wide range of problems that we are encountering. And if I want to be more philosophical, which is something that I would reiterate from my own presentation, was that is it okay for technology to replace the human actor? And if it is, what are the prerequisites for that? And if it is not, how do we make sure that the technology remains centered around the human user and remains controlled by the human user? So yeah, I like to finish here, because I could go on for weeks about this, but I'm just as eager to hear everybody else on this panel too.
Yes, thank you very much. You've opened very many questions, actually, and I have to say that I've read a paper that Jos sent us, basically to prepare for this roundtable discussion, and I would like to pass the floor to you, Jos, because I know that you are dealing with, this is your work, and maybe you could add to this, either to the biggest ethical concerns or to the data ownership and recognition of translators when they are feeding the neural machine, basically with training data.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I missed Balazs's presentation earlier. I was teaching at the time, and I had to smile at the start of a recommendation of a book, because the last time we met in London a couple of years ago, I emerged with a list of about 6 books to read. But there are numerous ethical issues to do with technology, to do with translation technology. I've mostly focused on issues to do with machine translation and sustainable workflows around translation, I suppose. And that is what I'll be presenting about as part of the workshop that follows this round table. So I'm not sure where really to begin, really, but there's, there are issues with data ownership, with permissions to use data, with data distribution, with privacy, with personal data. Balazs mentioned the difficulties with cybersecurity, and it's something my eyes were opened to in the last few years. I was supervising a PhD student who was looking at ransomware attacks, and the impossibility of knowing where the next attack would come from, and to an extent the impossibility of data security, where really anyone that tries to keep their data secure can only just really be reactive rather than proactive in trying to secure things. So if there are obvious weaknesses, perhaps, in cybersecurity, then those can be fixed. But it's impossible to catch them all. So the tendency is to either employ, in a direct or an indirect way, hackers to try and work and search for exploits on your behalf, or to just react to when those exploits are found. And it really makes me concerned about data security, considering that so much of our data in general, personal related to our work and personal related to our personal lives, is in the cloud. Relating to the use of MT professionally, in the workshop that follows, I'll look at translation stakeholders and aspects of risk and liability, the considerations of, I probably won't have time to get to the considerations of using computers as implicit ethical agents and trying to program ethical behavior in computers. But I suppose the discourse about technology these days is becoming more critical, and we're becoming increasingly aware that technology is not value neutral, and it engenders a worldview that is related to the background, the intentions, and the decisions made related to that of the developers and the people who had the idea to develop the tool. And I'm gratified that increasingly there's more of a critical discourse about technology in general, and that is starting to move across to translation, because it's very important for how technology is deployed and for the sustainability of the translation industry. But I would like to see more of a participatory, consultative approach in the development and the deployment of technology throughout translations. I think that would be a very healthy development.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Mic issues, technology involved again. Mr. Tihlárik or Matej, do you want to add to this your view on as well the human factor that plays in this whole machine translation, post-editing business?
Yeah, well, yesterday evening when I was trying to prepare on this roundtable, I was studying who is my counterpart, and I found that Jos Moorkens is a guru in translation ethics. So I'm quite afraid because I'm only person here with technical education. You are all linguists, and I'm running the agency, and I'm only representative of agencies here. So my position is like in lion's pit, you know. so from this case, well, from this point of view, well, I put a basic question: what ethics in my work basically means as a leader of an agency? And the basic ethical rules is that my agency is trustworthy supplier for my clients and trustworthy client for my suppliers. That is absolutely necessary to keep my agency to stay alive from a long-term point of view. So this answers everything, even machine translation approach and things like that. And from my point of view, the basic problem, well, I wouldn't call that ethical problem, but it is connected with ethical matters, is the pricing. How to pay for post-editing, how to pay for recycling of text, how to deal with these things. And this is something that is definitely most important part of it, because it's a payment, you know, for your work. So this is something we are trying to solve every day. And I would like to quote Jos Moorkens' sentence from his book, and the sentence was that the translation industry in general appears to consider business ethics subordinate to the profit motive, and receives little pushback from translators who are often not in a position to maximize their agency due to disparities of power. And I would like to generalize this sentence, because every industry in the general appears to consider business ethics subordinate to the profit motive. Every industry, not only translation, especially if it received little pushback from suppliers. But I wouldn't say that that the little pushback is caused by disparities of power, because translators are very powerful, very powerful. It's a big group. If we lose them, we are at the end.
Do you want to react to this? It was a direct quote from your book. So would you like to react to this statement from an agency?
Yeah, no, I think it's perfectly reasonable. It's from his experience. I think it was dangerous of me to generalize, considering that the translation industry is very multifarious and very general. There are lots of different experiences, and I think I've tried to be fair in also saying that this isn't true of all agencies either, and there are agencies that try to develop a long-term trust relationship. I think I agree that trust is key. There are agencies that try to build up a long-term trust relationship with their translators, with their clients, and then there are others that will just try to cut the bottom line at the first opportunity. And it seems unfortunate that some of the ones that are least respecting of their translators are some of those that are the biggest and most well-known providers internationally. And it may be related to the fact that there are shareholders to satisfy, and therefore the profit motive trumps everything. But if you look at the literature on business ethics, none of it suggests discounting the profit motive, because the focus is on the sustainability of the enterprise. And if the enterprise doesn't make a profit, then it's not sustainable. But the key is really what Elkington called people, planet, and profit. that triple bottom line and trying to balance all of those. So that's aiming for balance is really what I would suggest, and I certainly don't suggest that it would be easy, because it's something that will constantly need tweaking and changing and adjusting, and pricing is a key element of that.
If I may, of course, this is very, very important. I would just want to add that if you want to ask questions, you can, of course, use Slido, because I'm already checking if there are any questions. Hashtag Tech 2021. Mr. Tihlárik, are there clients who do not want you to use machine translation when you are providing them with translation products?
Yeah. This is a very specific thing that, for example, we have clients who do not allow us to use publicly available machine translation engines. So it is strictly forbidden by a contract that we can't use, for example, Google Translate. It's natural because, for example, if Microsoft translates something, they don't want to share this text and the machine translation learning with Google, of course. So it should be considered as a very, very tough thing. And if I can give some advice to translators, please follow this instruction, because it is trackable. If you are using Google Translate or DeepL Translate machine translation for your work, it is trackable, and they can find you and they can penalize you. So be careful.
Good advice for translation students, or for anyone who may think that data is not traceable nowadays, because it is, we know. And we are being watched right now by many, and by the big brother probably himself. Matej, over to you. You are working for the European Commission, like me, but you hold a more important language technology coordinator role. I would like you to explain it more to us, and also to answer the question whether the Commission translators can choose not to use machine translation because they do not want to be post editors.
Yes, thank you, Emily. Can you hear me? Well, yes, they can, to start from the end. And I'm sorry if I get interrupted, because it seems that the internet's a little dodgy. To start from the end, yes, they can choose not to use it, and it's basically part of my job to try to persuade them that they should. I'm a big fan and proponent of technological developments and machine translation in particular, and I've seen a lot of progress, as all of us have, in coming from statistical to neural. Of course, we are in a bit of a different situation where we ourselves build data that trains the engines that then provide a tool for us to work better, work faster, more efficient, which is why I think it's easier to feel the ownership of a machine translation tool, see it as something good. But I think it's not strictly linked to ethics, I think, but I think there's been a period when statistical machine translation wasn't as good as the neural is now, and people were trying to use that, and some of them got discouraged. So then we need to try a second shot with this one and see if that gets better results for them. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yes, it did. But could you explain what you do? Because language technology coordinator, what does it mean? And maybe just so that the audience gets it better.
Well, it's quite a manifold function. One part of that I've already mentioned is trying to get our colleagues to make the best possible use of the language technologies that we have at our disposal, so become as proficient users as possible. Also, troubleshooting technical difficulties, over time we can do that fairly quickly, since we know these technologies. Keeping an eye out for developments on the market, new tools, ushering the colleagues through
Yes, it seems
periods of changes and things like that.
Okay. We do have internet connection issues on your side.
Sometimes also troubleshooting originals. It's pretty diverse, especially in translate. It's too with the job itself. I'm sorry about.
Yeah, today the connection from Brussels and from Luxembourg is not ideal, I have to say. Jos, how does the use of NMT relate to job satisfaction of translators? You pointed out in your paper that good translators are actually leaving the industry because they don't want to become post-editors. Well, it's a question for Jos first, but for the others as well. How do you see this? Because this might endanger the whole industry, because if we do not feed the machines with good data, they will not produce good data or the good output. And if we lose good translators, I think we are really at a high risk of being, be it an ethical question or not. So, Jos, maybe you would like to answer?
Yeah, sure. I think to an extent the claims on behalf of post-editing taking over from translation are a little overstated. Certainly it seems to be happening in the audiovisual translation industry, but looking at the industry as a whole, if we look at the CSA research industry analysis, not everyone agrees with the CSA research analysis, but their report from 2019, looking at the previous 4 years, they let me see, there's a bit of feedback here. I'll turn down the volume a little. They claim that the percentage of turnover of the language services industry that comes from machine translation post-editing has remained static at a little under 4% over the last 4 years, from 2015 to 2019. So back in 2010, CSA Research said that post-editing was the fastest growing area of translation. They said it was worth 1 billion of a 40 billion industry at the time. Now that the industry is, they claim, reaching something in the region of 60 billion, it's been static at around 4%. More broadly than just talking about post-editing, there's still a bit of noise in the background, so I hope you can hear me okay. More broadly than post-editing, I just think that there needs to be a focus on job satisfaction to retain talent in the industry. There's been claims of a skills shortage, of a talent crunch, and in some translation workflows, there's a tendency to break work down, to decompose work down into chunks, so that translators are just working on sections of text or sections of a TV program without any real visibility of the whole. And there's a real danger to the job satisfaction that they will get from that, because looking at Hertzberg's theory of motivation, there are certain factors that are demotivating if they're not satisfied, to do with pay, to do with job security. But the things that actively motivate us in our work are feeling like our work is of importance, that we're contributing to a greater whole, that we're learning in our work. And those sort of intrinsic factors, I don't think are always taken into consideration, because it's quite easy in a translation workflow not to consider them, because translators as freelancers are external actors. I'm not suggesting that that's the way it works with all agencies. I have to be careful with present company, but it needs to be a consideration.
Yes, any comment on that?
Well, I have a few points. First is towards Balazs Kis, and the second is regarding the pricing for, let's say, for MTPE. Is a flat discount on MTPE ethical or unethical? Should we use a flat discount for translation, for post editing, or should we measure that somehow differently? There exists a method that is called TR, translation edit rate, that is based on edit distance, that can evaluate the effort which was put on by translators after the post editing. Have you heard about it? If this TR measure would be integrated into CAD tools, that would make things more simple in general. So this is the question for Balazs Kis, whether it will be integrated in MemoQ or not. And that's probably everything, because we are at this stage, we are really measuring the effort done by post editors on post editing by TR. We have developed our own macros which can calculate the amount of work. And if I can remind you, what is it? Translation edit distance is the number of edits you do on segments. Edits means the shift of the word. It is based on the word level. So it is a shift of the word, deletion, insertion, and exchange of the word. So 4 edits. And the translation edit rate is the number of edits done on the segment slash the sum of words in the segment. So the number of edits is divided by a number of words in the segment. And this measure gives you quite precise estimate how much work did you invest into the segment. So this is very important thing, and this is what we are using for evaluation, for evaluating the effort done on post editing.
So over to Mr. Kis, would you like to react to this question, whether MemoQ intends to integrate it?
Thank you. Actually, there has been a whole lot of questions that also returning to Joss about and to the question of job satisfaction. One of the biggest things that I experienced comes before satisfaction is that in many cases the translators are put off and irritated by the loss of control, that they had relative control as freelancers over projects that were not cut up into 10, 20, 100, 1,000 slices because turnaround time has to be kept low, and also the volume of translation was going up, and that was already a phenomenon before neuro machine translation. So you don't have to be a post editor to experience this. In the ancient times, we were even berated for applying this segment-based approach that, come on, we are dealing with text, we are dealing with running text, how come you slice it up into segments and we need to deal with segments at the same time? I have an answer to that, but this is not the question that I was asked. So when it comes to pricing, we've been keeping communication-wise, a delicate balance, because we are working for 3 segments basically. We are working for freelance translators, we are working for agencies, for translation companies, and we are working for enterprises who are also end users of translations. and in that situation, the best thing a technology provider can do is be transparent, allow an insight into what's happening with the translation through version control, through comparisons. And this question really reminded me how well we hide the good things in our own software. I don't know about the others actually, and I don't really want to go into advertising here, but actually MemoQ does have edit distance reporting and editing time reporting, and it's been there for, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years. So so we've been dealing with this. We are quite aware of this, and all kinds of measurements and reports are there in MemoQ. Maybe not the best accessible, and like, yeah, that must be a UX problem if it's so well hidden that an agency wasn't able to find it. But it's, to my mind, it's also part of the transparency that a technology developer, technology provider must provide. Because obviously we are not in a position to decide about pricing schemes or pricing models, but what our responsibility is to provide or facilitate the provision of all the necessary information for the users to decide and agree. I'm not sure if this was an answer, but
partially is.
Hopefully, yes. I'll pick up already. There are 2 questions on Slido. One is for Jos. Well, thank you all for your input. And then the question is, how would you advise to deal with the concepts of ethics and technology in teaching? Which was also my next question, whether the future graduates are prepared for this, for dealing with ethics and technology, since it is very present in translation training.
First of all, can I react to a couple of the last points, please?
Yes, of course.
Thanks. Sorry about this. First of all, to do with the use of TER, I think it can be a little bit risky because all it gives you is the starting point and the end point. And what we see with neural machine translation is that sometimes the errors are difficult to spot, and the actual technical effort, the number of edits, isn't always huge, but it is quite time consuming. So in research, we haven't found a huge jump in productivity moving from SMT to NMT. In every other way, NMT is a jump in terms of fluency, of adequacy, automatic evaluation metrics, that sort of technical effort, the number of edits, the number of keystrokes. But when it comes to the actual time spent, it doesn't seem to provide the same premium. So one thing I was impressed by, and this comes back to Balazs's comment, was I spoke to a company that used MemoQ based in Brisbane, Australia. He's probably familiar with which of their customers it is. And this customer told me that they offer their translators / post editors 3 options for payment. So there is the word rate, a time rate, or an edit rate based on the feedback from MemoQ that Balazs mentioned. Now, I did mention this to Peter Reynolds from MemoQ, who said that they hadn't received any feedback, so they didn't know exactly the veracity and accuracy of this technical effort rate, this edit rate. But it's that sort of transparency, offering the translators an option and allowing them to change that, giving them the sort of a very clear feedback of the benefits and how much faster post-editing is proving, if it is proving faster, seems like a good way to go for pricing. In response to the question to do with ethics in training, our preference in Dublin City University is to just try and make our graduates as aware as possible of the various issues, so that if they graduate, become freelance translators, that they're empowered, that they have quite a deep knowledge of the technologies, and that they're aware of the issues, but also our graduates are going to become decision makers. They'll be the rate setters. They'll be the people who are making decisions in the future. So it's important that for them as well, that they're cognizant of the various ethical issues that might not initially be apparent.
Thank you. Matej, you also nodded you also wanted to say something about TER, because I saw that you really longed to speak.
No, I just agree. I think that the sheer fact that a translator doesn't make an edit mean that he hadn't had to check if the machine did everything correctly. So it may be a little bit misleading, maybe.
Which brings us to the next question on Slido. What would be main differences between post-editing and translation revision after human translation from translators' perspectives? So who would like to answer that one? A living translator.
These are completely different things. Post-editing is something else, something different. Revision after human translation is
not post-editing.
Yeah. So I wouldn't compare that. These are different operations.
I agree. Okay. Yes, sorry, because I can't see you properly. So Balazs, you wanted to say something? Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that as a technology provider, but as a former editor in publishing, I have seen and went through, I don't know, thousands of pages of translated works, and what I guess, regardless of the source, and obviously what the work I'm talking about took place mostly from 1996 to 2004, but and those works were made by humans. But part of the difficulty is to actually assessing the translation that you receive, to find the errors, to decide which problems you will fix in the translation. There is also the notion of fitness for purpose, and there was a PhD student of mine who did research on editorial changes on translations, and it turned out that 20 to 25% of changes that reviewers, editors make are preferential and do not necessarily are not necessarily supported by kind of hard evidence that you could actually mark in an LQA, a linguistic QA report. What I also saw, because I tried that myself, there's a considerable difference between post-editing neuro-machine translation and statistical machine translation. That's been mentioned, but I just want to share an anecdote here. The neuro translation is similar to the what I would call the lying translator or the treacherous translator. We have been dealing with translators. Well, I haven't been working with translators for the last 10 years, but before, who fought their way through the text, and if they didn't understand something, they either left it out or substituted with something different. And that's really similar to how a neuro-machine translation engine acts when so it doesn't have a pattern, doesn't have previous data for something, and that kind of problem is really hard to detect. And this is where Josie is right when he says that a lot of time is spent in actually taking a long, hard look at the translation and finding out what the problem might be. Maybe you need to look into the original. Of course you do, but you need to take a long, hard look on the context of the original, and then find out that, all right, this actually can mean the opposite of what was meant in the original text. But it takes a lot of effort without making any changes to the text itself. So yes, they are different, but there is also I don't think the actual difficulty of the work depends on the source, but it depends on the kind of translation errors we are dealing with.
Yes, that's true. Thank you. Mr. Tihlárik, I still have one more question for you regarding the... it's not only because you are sitting next to me, but you are getting students and you are training them. So do you see that they are already dealing with these ethics in technology in real life? Or what is, when we talk about Slovak students, how well are they prepared in this field?
From this point of view, they are tabula rasa. And we have to teach them everything. And this is a big opportunity to see how these things happened in our environment. And I think this is helpful for them. But the amount of internships is limited. So that's the problem. So we can't teach everybody.
But you could advise them now, those who are watching, what should they focus on?
What should they focus on? This is probably the target should be the teachers.
They are sitting here and watching us.
The students, they are learning what you provide, you know. So it's an educational institution should think about these things and should make more contacts with agencies and make more understanding of processes which are now modern and state of the art.
Yep.
So
I'm sure that's what they are trying to do.
actually, I think that translation now with the most matured clients is really very complex. It's never been so complex like now. So translators should be really very smart people because they are working with many levels of information, instruction, tools, different level of information that is hidden in the text they are translating. So a machine, it doesn't matter whether it is the neural or statistical, can work only on the word level, but not on the higher levels of information that are hidden in the combination of words and things like that. So I consider AI to be a really very smart tool how to do things faster and more efficiently, but nothing else. It's like comparison of horse and airplane, you know, but it's still horse is, you are sitting on the horse or sitting in the airplane, moving faster, but nothing else. So there is no intelligence, that's just smart, that is just smart tool.
Yeah, but I think that we will basically have to trust and rely upon artificial intelligence to some extent.
I'm afraid that how can artificial intelligence or neural machine translation translate Baudelaire, poesy of Baudelaire, you know? So it is impossible simply because there is a lot of emotions and machine translation can't work with emotions.
Yeah, neither does it understand culture.
And culture, of course.
Yeah. But the truth is that there is more demand for translation than the human translators can translate, so we have to rely on machine. But we have a question here. If I do MTPE, which is post-editing of machine translation of a text that I was assigned by an agency, whose name should be given as the author? Agencies anonymize translators, and it is not ethical, I believe.
This is a very good question. We have contracts, and how did it go? The rights, copyrights are part of the contract. So copyrights are not in the hands of translators. So if our contracts contain these things, and also we are not owner of the copyrights as an agency. Just client is the owner of the copyrights. So this is not unethical if you sign such contract. That's the rule, you know. That's you have chance to reject such contract. You don't have to write it, but sign it, but. That's the basic rule, and this is for everybody, for every clients we work with, including European Union and European Commission. We have the same contract. We have no rights for the text for the translation we perform. The same is for translators.
But are the translators always aware of these contracts? Do they read them?
They should read it.
Okay. Another question. We have still time, so please, if you have questions, use this opportunity to ask our guests where is the line in collaborative translations? I hope I read it correctly. If an agency splits a text for several translators, who is responsible for the final quality?
Translators are responsible only for that part they translated. We are responsible for the whole.
So it is the agency. Is it
yes, the agency.
Is it the same, Matej, in the institutions?
Well, in the institutions, there's a joint responsibility between the translator and the reviser. And I guess it's the institution itself that's responsible for the whole if it gets split up. But I'm not sure if I'm really qualified to answer that question.
Yeah, probably every institution is different. I can say that in the Commission, in the European Commission, it is the translator who's responsible. So one of these translators who work on the text and is assigned as the final, the person responsible, whereas in the other institution, it might be the reviser who is responsible. So it differs. Balazs, yes, you want to say something to this?
I just want to say that obviously, if we are talking about an organization, most likely a translation company, the translation company is responsible to have a quality assurance process, and there is even a standard for the ISO 17100 standard that grew out from the EN 15038. I'm saying these numbers so that you can look them up. So it's not even Wild West out there anymore, because there's a standard. There's a standard by which you can work. There are quality standards for the European Union towards the translation companies that work for them. So that could be a well-defined process. And then when the end product is given to the client, it will be the legal representative of the translation company that will be ultimately responsible for the quality, because that's how these contracts go. As to I can sympathize with Amelia's question about translators and on the whole. Natural persons, freelancers reading their contracts. Some of them are really conscious about those. Some others are not. But if I could imagine a program, a course, a direction in university programs where you actually teach them how to set up a contract, what a contract looks like, how to read it. Because legalese and legal language and the way you enter into contracts is a thing that can be learned, and it shouldn't be especially the freelancers shouldn't be left to their own devices to figure those out.
I fully agree with that. Not only that, in the past when I was working as a freelance translator, I don't remember really reading any contract or that it was given to me. I was just basically assigned a job and I was doing it. So yes, Did you want to add something, or can I?
I have to admit that the contracts we have signed with our most powerful clients are a nightmare. Nightmare. And we have to forward these things also on our translators because we have to be on safe side.
So it's good that the situation has improved over the years. Any thoughts on the possibility that the use of neural machine translation may be able to expand the responsibilities of translators, as Anthony Pym argues? I have to admit, I'm not sure how to expand the responsibilities. Does anyone want to answer this question? Joss, yeah?
I don't know if the question is related to the suggestion that translators could have a useful advisory role. It's an idea that was put forward by the likes of Sharon O'Brien, Alan Melby, and others. The basic idea being that if they're aware of what training data is appropriate use cases for machine translation, and also inappropriate use cases for machine translation, they can have a useful advisory role, thus expanding their abilities. And rather than being someone who's at the end of a production network who just receives a text to post edit, they can have an involved role, a key role throughout the production network, and be decisive and expert, thus expanding their role. I think that's the idea.
Thank you. There was another question, if I may. Yeah, I think there was something. This is for you again.
Exactly.
So agency translations basically don't have an author on paper.
Yeah, agency is the author, but we have no copyright.
Okay, so this one is answered. I don't know, we still have time if you have more questions, or maybe a direct question from the audience that is sitting here. No? We have a few people sitting with us, which is wonderful. Finally, after a long time, we have some physical presence. Students and teachers following us. Any other thoughts on human factor in machine translation? How does it play? Everything was
I would
said.
like to ask a question,
Yeah?
actually, if I may. And that's related to, I suppose, related to that last question about the expanding role of translators, and how in the European Parliament there's the change of title to intercultural experts, and to Matej, to how machine translation is viewed within the European Commission, and the role the European Commission has as sort of an exemplar, because we see how technology and the uses, the deployment of technology in one place has an influence on another. I had a PhD student that was examining a translation or subtitling production network in Thailand. And the assumption was, because post-editing was being brought in for other language pairs, well, it'll just work here. They did it elsewhere. Let's do it here. Not even considering the quality and the fact that English Thai MT is not particularly good at present, even with NMT. So the European Commission and the institutions in general have a very important role as a sort of a standard bearer for translators. And is that something that's considered, I want to know, within the European Commission with regard to bringing in the use of MT? And is it always done in a consultative way?
Thank you, Joss. I didn't hear quite a large portion of the question because it kicked me out. But I will try to answer. The first part I heard is how do translators feel about NMT, right? In the commission, Well, like everywhere, I think you have a larger pool of people. Some people are going to be very enthusiastic about it, others less so. But it's true that it's not just in the freelance world, but also for us, it's true that we're getting more and more work to translate. And so we need the help of all the tools we can get. And people do need to acquire new skills in order to keep up with the demand. And I think in this respect, we're doing a pretty good job.
And if I
So,
may,
and
yeah, sorry,
yes,
Matej. If I may add, yes, Jos was also asking if the institutions are doing this, setting a standard, and whether it is done in consultative way, right, Jos? To put it very shortly. Did you hear me, Matej?
yes, now I heard like about half of what you said. But if the institutions are first, what do you think, Emily?
Okay, so Jos, you will have to live with something that was not, that will not probably be answered. Well, Matej can't hear us, and he knows probably better than I do. We do consult. We do consult, and we would like to set a standard. That's why we are holding these conferences, these workshops, to also consult with the other stakeholders. We have this large Translating Europe forum, where we also will be probably discussing these issues in the beginning of November. And hopefully this will evolve into some standards that could be looked upon by the rest of the industry. So that is all I can say towards this. Yeah, Mr. Tihlárik agrees. We have 4 more minutes, so let us, I don't know if there is anything on Slido. No. So if there is nothing else and no one else would like to add anything to this very interesting topic, I have to say I have learned a lot today from you. Being a complete tabula rasa myself before this roundtable discussion, I would like to thank you for participation, for really having time to join us, even despite the technology troubles and everything. We heard almost all of you perfectly. I would like to thank also the interpreters who did a great job. And for the first time today, we will finish on time, which is good. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, and hope to see you soon, and probably in person. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.